Maine, June 27th.
From the Added Journals of David Crandall. This trail is very steep and rocky. They are the rockiest, extreme, dangerous, and longest hike that we have ever done, and its difficulty should never be underestimated. We camped at Katahdin Stream campsite in a big tent. We started this, how should I put this? Oh yes, adventure, on the Abel Trail in Baxter State Park. Our plan was to climb to the top of Mount Katahdin and then return back to our car, and then the next day to start at our campsite and climb the Appalachian Trail to the Abel Trail Junction. A park ranger had told us that 3 hikers had climbed up the rock slide from here to the AT Junction, and that 2 of the hikers had climbed over one of the larger boulders on the slide. But when the 3rd hiker climbed over the same boulder, the boulder just decided to roll down the slide, carrying its passenger with it. He did not survive the ride down. We could have never imagined the difficulty that these 2 trails had planned for us.
From the Journals of Lori Crandall. The Abel Trail north to Mount Katahdin, south to Katahdin Stream Campground. These trails were extremely difficult, with the most climbing and the longest miles that we have ever done. We started on the Abel Trail in a nice pine forest, but then the trail began to climb up steeply, up a rock slide. The slide was steep, and for miles, all you could see was the rock slide. It was very hot, around 90 degrees, and the black flies were awful. They were biting our ears and were all over our face and hands. We met up with a boys' youth group with 2 male leaders. In one bad section, they helped me over a boulder that was twice my size. We reached Tharo Spring that had no water, and we were running out of water. We continued on the AT on the tablelands. It was a beautiful area, but the black flies and the heat made the hiking unbearably. The area had some moss and alpine plants. We continued to climb and could see the sign on top of Mount Katahdin. Dave was very excited and getting emotional about seeing the famous sign that we had seen on all the videos we watched and books that we had read about the Appalachian Trail. The way up to the top was cold and windy, with clouds coming over the summit. We sat down and ate our lunch. The youth group told us that they would give us a ride back to our car at the Abel parking lot if we took the AT back down to the campground. They told us that it would be easier. That was a laugh. It would be the hardest climb down that we had ever done. One of the boys from the youth group had given us some of his water because we had run out. Trail magic. First time we ever had to bum for water. We headed back down the trail, and it was beautiful, with lots of alpine plants, bunchberries, and great views of the surrounding mountains. Mount Katahdin was in the clouds. We began the steep descent off Katahdin. We had to climb over and under and between and around large boulders. Some of them you could not see what was on the other side. One nasty part put us up against a boulder and the edge of the trail along a straight drop down. Some slated rocks even had metal hand grips in the rock to climb up or down. The black flies were eating us alive, getting under and inside my pants legs and biting hard. They were biting my hands too. I had bite marks all around my ankles. When we reached the pine forest, we reached a spring coming out from under some rocks. We tried to filter some water, but the water filter did not work, and we were out of water again, and it was really hot. It was getting later and later, and we were worried that we might not make it out in time to fix dinner and clean up. We had passed many beautiful areas, but we were too stressed, tired, and sore to enjoy them. We had seen Katahdin Falls, but decided that we would come back another day to see it. We were just too tired. We reached the campground. However, the youth group was nowhere in sight. I was worried that we were not going to have any food for tonight because it was in the car at the Abel Trail parking lot. It was too far to walk, and we were hoping to find a park ranger to give us a ride to our car. On our walk to the ranger station, we saw a Boy Scout group, and the leader said that he would give Dave a ride back to our car. I went back to the tent to clean up and fill the bathwater pails. We would be forever happy that we made it up and down Mount Katahdin. This was our first 9 miles day hike that we had ever done on the Appalachian Trail, or any trail that we have ever hiked, and the most brutal trail. June 28th, Katahdin Stream Campground south to Dicey Pond. We started from our campsite and followed the AT through the campground. It was 92 degrees, hot and humid. The trail went over a wood footbridge of a stream that went to Elbow Pond. We saw some lily pads blooming and the mountain views, but they were in the haze and the mosquitoes were bad here. However, we saw a moose. The moose was in the middle of the pond and it had its head in the water, and at first all we could see was its antlers. Then the head came up and he was big. It was our first moose sighting. Then the trail passed around Dacey Pond on a bog bridge. We saw some lily pods that were blooming. Dave said that he didn't know that the lily pods had flowers. Then we entered a pine forest with green moss on the ground and rocks. We came out to Dacey Pond with cabins. Dave wanted to wet his head in the pond. We saw what we thought was a fish. A woman who overheard us corrected us and told us that what we saw were pollywogs, which turns into frogs. We already knew that. She told us that the black flies were bad in June and July in the higher elevation, but go away by the 4th of July. We took the Dacey Pond Nature Trail and the Grassy Pond Trail back to the AT. We were really very hot. We were ready to finish this hike and get back to camp. We reached our camp and decided to take a dip in the cold mountain stream. It felt ice cold, and we could only dip in and out quickly. It was great splashing around in the water and laughing at Dave dipping in and out. We cooled off quickly. Another first in ice-cold water, and the first time in years that I have been in the water outside in the summer. The quiet here is great, but it would better without the bugs and bug bites. June 29th, Chimney Pond Trail, head to Chimney Pond. This is not the AT. Although this trail is not part of the AT, it is part of Baxter State Park. The trail started off with a climb over some rocks. The river ran alongside the trail. It was a beautiful area, but the climb up was very difficult. We had to step over many rocks and boulders on the way up. It was a constant climb up for 3.3 miles. We pushed it past the halfway point and reached a great viewpoint over a lake. We saw a snake. Dave thought that it was a rattlesnake, but no, it was just a big gardener snake. The park ranger had told us that there were no rattlesnakes in Maine. We met the woman that we had seen yesterday who scolded us about the tadpole was coming down. She had told us that she went up this trail and that the rest of the way up was flat. Well, that was a laugh. It still climbed up steeply over more rocks and boulders. We reached a yurt. We went inside and looked around. It had bunk beds and a wood stove inside. We were going to eat our lunch inside, but it was too hot. We found the outhouse was very full. The ranger had told us that they change the plastic box inside the outhouse when they get full and save them until winter. Then they slide them down the mountain. The top was kind of anticlimactic, and it was so hot and the black flies were so bad that we just did not want to stay very long up here. We filtered some water at the glacier pond and headed back down. It was a beautiful area, even though the trail was hard with temperatures in the 80s. We had seen a grouse on the way back. June 30th, Dacey Pond south to Nesawennahunk Falls. Last night we had a thunderstorm with driving rain. The trail was very wet with thousands of mosquitoes and temperatures in the 70s. We parked in the Dacey Pond parking lot and went to the toll dam. Not too exciting. We saw the spring, but did not filter any water because of all the mosquitoes. We reached Little Niagara Falls, but the sign was gone, so we did not know if this was Little Niagara Falls. Then we reached Big Niagara Falls. This was a very scenic area and went down to a ledge just a little above the river and saw Balancing Rock. The bridges were out at both the upper and lower Nesawennahunk stream. The lower stream was very difficult to cross. It seemed like they would fix the bridges before thru-hiker season. This section of the trail was washed out in a lot of places. It was right along the river and the area was grassy and sandy. This area was nice because it had a cool breeze off of the falls that kept the bugs away. We saw a red squirrel and some ducks. We heard mostly the river the whole trail. On the way off the trail, we heard a screaming sound in the woods. Some kind of bird? July 1st, Abol Bridge north to Nesawennahunk Falls. We had to find Golden Road, which is a dirt logging road that went hundreds of miles. The ranger had told us to turn right at the Painted Rock. He told us that there were no signage and to turn onto another dirt road and then right again onto another dirt road. We were surprised that only logging, graveling trucks, and some campers were on these roads. We met a southbounder and asked him where the AT was. He said to go down this dirt road and through the gravel bank onto the AT. We brought some new bug spray. The bugs here were worse than we have ever seen. Well, the new deep woods spray did not deter these Maine bugs. The trail started out in the gravel bank with lots of graffiti on the rocks. However, we found some wild flowers near the trail. There were orange flower ones, small daisy, wild roses, purple flowers, and strawberries. We ate some of the strawberries. First time for that on this trip. The trail reached a Baxter State Park information sign with information about the Birch's lean-to. We crossed a couple of footbridges in the Blueberry Ledge Trail and the Fossin Knowlton Trail. We passed a camp and were surprised that someone had set up on parkland right next to the AT. It had a big sign that said, "No trespassing." We could hear a large group of people having a barbecue party. We reached an area with large ferns, and the trail followed a wide river, and we saw several white water rafters going by. Unfortunately, on the other side of the river was Golden Road, and we could hear logging, graveling trucks most of the time from the trail. The bugs here were worse because it was so humid out, and it was getting damp and cloudy with no wind. We ran back to our car, and when we drove away, Dave found out that he had forgotten the camera in the parking lot. This turned out into a 2-day affair to get it back. July 2nd, Able Bridge south to Herd Brook Lean-To. This was my favorite part of the AT. We entered the hemlock forest from Able Bridge with lots of white pine and hemlock trees, and the ground was covered in pine needles. We reached a sign for the 100-mile wilderness. We passed into a small cedar bog area and some large boulders. We found a small spring in a beautiful area. It had stone steps going up the trail. We filtered some water at the spring. The mountain spring water tasted great. We made it to Herd Brook Lean-To and had met some through hikers heading north and 2 backpackers starting the 100-mile wilderness going south. They had their gear spread out in the lean-to. The lean-to was in a nice pine forest. On the way back, we found some wild strawberries and we stopped at the Apple store to see if anyone had turned in our camera. We had looked in the parking lot where Dave had left it before we started our hike today. Someone was parked next to us that day, so we believed that it was a couple that we had met on the trail that day. We believed that they might have found the camera and turned it into the store, but no one said that the camera was turned in. The store was very cute inside, with wood floors and antiques and canned goods way out here in the woods on Golden Road. This was in an area of rafters, boaters, and young teen guys partying. We took some pictures of the store, Apple Bridge, and the Painted Rock. The day was great with good weather, with temperatures around 70 and sunny and low humidity, the best day of the trip. We saw a red squirrel and a grouse on the way back to the car. I heard a lot of noise and thought that it might have been a moose or a bear, but it was just the red squirrel. July 3rd, not the AT. The Owlhead Trail. Yes, I know that you've heard this name before. This is the Owlhead Trail, and it is not the Appalachian Trail, as you have heard this name before, and as it is part of this trip, I thought that I would tell you about it. This was a beautiful trail, but very hard. We left our campsite and climbed the AT to the Owlhead Trail at 1.1 miles from the campsite. We turned off the AT, and it was nice to leave the crowds of people climbing Mount Katahdin on the 4th of July weekend. All kinds of people were heading up, people with packs, old people with big cameras, and people with no water. Some of them probably would not make it to the summit, and some would only make it to the falls. The trail was really pretty with a lot of spruce and hemlock trees. The sun was out and shining through the trees, casting shadows on the pine-covered ground, making everything magical. We passed a small mountain stream, and then the trail started the steep, hard climb up. We emerged onto a view and had great views of the climb up the AT to Katahdin that we had done. We could see with the video camera hikers climbing the same trail we were on when we did Katahdin over the boulder scramble. As we neared the top, we reached the boulders on this section of the trail, and it was just as hard as Katahdin, but not as long, only about 3.4 miles from our campsite. We could see people on the top, and were shocked to see that the top was still coming. We saw some blueberries that was not yet ripe on the trail. We also found some bunchberries and trout lily that were everywhere. The ground was covered with moss that blanketed the trail. We were impressed with how steep the trail was here. The top was breezy, and we sat at the top to eat our lunch. The day was wonderful with sunny skies, a nice breeze, and with temperatures in the 70s and few bugs. We returned back to the AT and hiked over to Katahdin Steam Falls. This was a beautiful waterfall. The bridge near the waterfalls was very picturesque. Conclusion of this trip. This is our last night here, and it has been great. We saw and heard a lot of wildlife. It has been a great trip and quiet most of the time. And let's not forget our friends, the red squirrel and his partners, the red chipmunk, and of course, Mr. Rabbit, who visited us in our campsite. We met some great people: the scout leader who gave us a ride back to our car, the ranger who extended our stay by a day, and the people who returned our video camera after they filmed themselves talking about how expensive it must be. We were shocked by how bad the black flies and mosquitoes were and how hard the climb up Mount Katahdin and Owlhead was. However, it was a great accomplishment.